What a night. The regular season is officially over. That is insane to think about, but it is indeed done. And now playoffs are finally here. Welcome to the Gem City Sports Podcast, everyone. Isaac Petcash, Jonathan Williams. We were in the Millennium Sound studio yesterday. We're joining you virtually here tonight. But excited because tonight is week 10 of high school football reaction. Make sure, of course, if you were at a game or you were part of the conversation, to drop a like, leave a comment, let us know exactly what game you were at, what the most intriguing game of the night was for you, because there were a lot of good ones for week 10, Jonathan, which is traditionally a throwaway week for a lot of teams, right? We see a lot of squads that are in the playoffs kind of gearing up for that first week of postseason. They either take off. Other teams just choose not to play their games. But I will say, given the fact that we didn't have the variety that we tend to have in week to week for high school football, we had some pretty interesting storylines that we're going to get to.
Yeah, no, it's you want to say, oh, it's a throwaway week, last week of the regular season. For teams that are firmly planted in the playoffs and everything, oh, it was a game to rest your guys and not really do too much, not really get anybody hurt or anything like that. But from some of the results and from some of the happenings in these games tonight, week 10 was anything but a snooze fest, I would say. Yeah. It was an exciting final week of the regular season. It was an exciting end to the season.
You'll see the score scroll across the bottom of your screen. We got 4 highlights to give you tonight as well, and that's really where we're going to focus our efforts on the night tonight. Again, make sure to like, subscribe our podcast. We're live on YouTube, Twitch, X, and Facebook right now. Nick Artman, Paul Adams will join us back next week, and it's the two of us here tonight. Let's start with Cathedral Prep and Farrell. The second straight year these two teams had met. Prep won down in Mercer County last season. Nothing to play for these two teams other than momentum riding into the playoffs, and for Prep off that big win over General McLean last week. Let's show you how it went down from Dollinger Field. We got here in the closing seconds of the first half. It's 7-0 Farrell. Aaron Peguis to the end zone. Jules Johnson can't corral it, so the half set 7-0. Second half, Farrell driving, but the Peguis pass sails on fourth down. Ramblers get the stop. They take over, but the defense, this was the problem for Prep. They could not figure out a way to get past Farrell's defense, except on this play. Ramir Wallace, guy we haven't heard much of this season, rumbling all the way down inside the red zone, but Cam Crispin from 38 can't hit, and it's a 7-3 game. Farrell facing 3rd and 22 here. Peguis in trouble. Gavin Easter got to come up with the INT on the lob ball. Prep trying to figure out a way to get in the end zone, but KJ Williams can't. He fumbles the ball while running out the clock, so it's still only 7-0 Prep. Last chance, Farrell. Peguis on fourth down. Matthew Oblick about to come up with the big play here. Take a look. He's running around, sprinting as you would. No Aaron Rodgers magic here. Prep wins 7-0, a defensive battle. But what you may not have heard in the highlight reel, Jonathan, as we bring it back out here, Prep wins the game, but John Laddick, who was at the game tonight, telling us that Davin Friedman left the game with an injury after getting hit earlier in the contest. He did not return. That's why you saw KJ Williams in the game. And more importantly, John saying on the sideline for Prep that Charbel Latouf sustained an injury and came back onto the sideline in crutches. So for Prep, your top 2 offensive weapons out in this game, and now is there panic potentially setting in for the Ramblers come playoff time?
Yeah, that is borderline worst case scenario if you're Prep. You do not want to lose one of those 2 guys, let alone both of them for a game. It's just not something. It's not something that's good news, and you hope that those guys can get back healthy as quickly as possible, because Latouf is everything to this Prep offense. 500 plus yards on the ground, 5 yards a pop this season. Like, he has been their workhorse on the ground this season. Losing him makes you a one-dimensional offense. Oh, wait, your quarterback that you've been relying on to throw the ball all over the field all year is also down. That's really hard to overcome as an offense if you're Prep. So you hope those guys can get back healthy as quickly as possible.
And that's another concern, again, for a Rambler team that's going to have to play in the sub-regional. That's what we've heard. The teams that are within that cluster of 5A squads, I believe Dubois is the team that they might likely face in the first sub-regional game. So it's not like previous years, right, where Cathedral Prep would get a week, 2 weeks, sometimes 3 weeks off before getting into the state playoffs. and getting a first-round quarterfinal matchup in PIAA. You're now going to have to deal with just a week before you start playing meaningful win-or-go-home playoff games. And my concern is this, Jonathan. I'm not as concerned with the quarterback situation because KJ Williams has played before, right? I.e. week 1 when he came into the game late to Erie after Davin Friedman sustained an injury. I think what KJ Williams brings to this Rambler team is almost a running component that Davin Friedman really doesn't have. But my biggest concern would be for Charbel Latouf because this prep offense we saw last week against GM, right? They could run the ball at will when Charbel is back there because they have multiple options. When he's not back there, I think teams can kind of key in more so on the passing game. And even with KJ Williams in, the downhill running game. And I don't know if Prep's offense is capable of having those multiple outlets if those two guys, specifically Latouf, are out.
It just makes it really easy as a defense to just go in and say, hey, just don't let KJ Williams beat you. Don't let him run behind. Don't let him get behind the tackles and between the tackles and run the football downhill. If they hand the ball off, just come up and tackle. But like it makes it easy for a defense to key in on the one threat that you have, who, by the way, is de facto your backup quarterback. So it's like if your best threat coming into the game is your backup quarterback, and that's the one guy that teams have to worry about, and they can key in on him and say, hey, just don't let this kid beat us. It makes it really hard to put together an offensive game plan that's going to work when your top two threats and your top two guys that touch the football for you are out.
Yeah, I agree. And so some concern for Prep. They win the game. They finish the season on a high note. And for Cathedral Prep 7-3, it's not too shabby. You win your first 5, you lose your next 2 and the 3, and then you win 2 straight to end the year. But there's some concern for the Ramblers now who will start facing teams outside of D10 in the sub-regional. That's a big storyline of the night. There were other 2 big storylines as well that we want to get to as well. Jonathan, you and I and Paul Adamczyk and Nick Artman talked on last night's podcast about how Erie and McDowell could be an interesting District 10 championship game. It was close when they played back earlier in the season. And the results tonight of the 2 teams' respective games might make you think one has momentum over the other. So let's start with McDowell. Senior night, by the way, and this man, Blaze Myers, already has some records this year. He set another one on this play. This pass puts him at the all-time career record holder list of McDowell passing yards. He went over 4,800 for his career. Big congrats to Blaze on that. Able to find James Ziegler for the 21-yard touchdown, Jonathan. These 2 are dynamic.
Yeah, 2 record breakers in their own rights and have a great connection going this season. But it's going to be interesting, this D10 championship game coming up. This is going to be fun, especially with these 2. These 2 are rolling. It's going to be fun.
Yeah. This is a Damar Dickerson touchdown to put McDowell up 13-7. Trojans would end up losing the game 35-33. Luckily for McDowell, no injuries. And again, Blaze Myers, and we're going to talk about this in just a minute. What an accolade for him. He sets the McDowell school career record for passing touchdowns and now passing yards. This guy's going to have to be good next week against Erie because the Royals, meanwhile, put on a clinic tonight. Earlier in the season, McDowell beat Meadville 49-21. We talked, Jonathan, in last night's podcast that for Erie, this would be a measuring stick game, right? Common opponents with McDowell. How would you fare? Well, the Chick-fil-A cow was about the only success that Meadville saw tonight in terms of making money and making big plays. Because this was a complete blowout. Bulldogs would get it to 8-7. Jordan Lawrence the touchdown to cut the Erie lead to 1, but then look at this, Giovanni Crosby. Erie special teams this season have been special to watch. Crosby taking to the distance for the touchdown, and that's a 16-7 lead at that point as they get the 2 here. Nice little end around to Natavion Tennant. 16-7 at that point, and then the Royals continuing to drive. Marquel Darnell rolling right on the fake play action, dumping it off. Christian Hamilton Jr., the reception touchdown. And Erie rolls in this game 44-7. They end their season 5-5, Jonathan, and completely dominate a Bulldog team who, again, didn't really have anything to play for. But this is impressive tonight from the Royals, who you and I talked about on the podcast as saying that if they were just consistent, we'd like them to beat McDowell without thinking in the District 10 championship game, even though McDowell's got some talented players. But what does this win tonight say about Erie and what they could potentially be? Because they end the year 5-5 and they have 5 impressive wins.
They have 5 impressive wins, and they showed exactly what we were talking about last night. They have the athleticism to compete with anybody they line up against. The difference in this game is going to be the battle of the trenches, and I kind of go back to a different common opponent, Cathedral Prep. We watched McDowell dismantle Prep up front. They outplayed Prep up front. They bullied Prep up front. They won that battle of the trenches, and that game was not close. And on the flip side, you saw Erie play Prep in the first game, and while they played them well, the battle up front was a little bit more evenly matched, and it gave Prep some opportunities to make some plays that they didn't get those opportunities against McDowell. Athletically and athlete for athlete, Erie can play with anybody. Skill positions, outside, like they can play with anybody, and they can run with anybody. That battle in the trenches is going to be the determining factor in this game for me. Yeah, Blaze Myers is great. James Ziegler is great. Stephon Porter, an amazing running back. Like the skill players on both sides are amazing football players, but that battle of the trenches is going to be what determines this one. If Erie can come out and play with some grit and hold their own up front, we could be in for a showstopper.
I think what impressed me about Erie in the last 5 weeks, right? They end the season, they win 4 or 5. And that's something that if you're Andre Henderson alone, you got to tip your cap to the locker room from, because Erie is a team that traditionally, as they game and the season goes on, they have faltered. And that wasn't the case this year. I think it's the first time really since Coach Henderson has taken over the program that we have seen the Royals make big strides late in the season, something that necessarily hasn't been the case for the Royal team. What I really think has been impressive, and again, I say this one more time as I did last night, this defense has made tremendous strides since week number 1. And I even think in week 1, they played pretty well against Cathedral Prep. This is a fundamentally sound defense that doesn't give up a ton of big plays. They didn't again tonight. In the win against Meadville, they allowed just 7 points. So if you look at their last 5 games of the season, Jonathan, there's only been one of those that they have given up more than 7 points. And I think when you look at the way that this defense has been performing, specifically just in the fact of, again, I talk about fundamentally sound, but I think even more so, it's the assignments, right? Because I think so often we are used to Erie missing assignments where maybe 9 guys on the field make a big play. Maybe they get pressure in the backfield on a passing down, but then the corner doesn't do his job and gets burned, or the safety tries to come up to the flat too often and then he gets burned and there's no help over the top. We're not seeing that this year with Erie. And I think that shows a lot of growth. It shows a lot of patience from Andre Henderson to allow these guys to mature into the players that they are. And I think what it will do against McDowell, if nothing else, it will keep Erie in the game. Is it enough to get them to win the game? I don't know. I know we're going to make our picks on the show next week. I just think for this Erie team, they have more of a base, more of a foundation to be able to stay in games because they don't make the big mistake than has been the case in previous years.
Yeah, for Erie, that's a credit to coaching. You know, that's a credit to focusing on little details. That's a credit to holding your guys accountable throughout the course of the season and not letting them relax, not letting them get content with the fact that they've been playing better football than the Erie Royals have played in I don't know how many years. Honestly, like this is one of the better seasons that this program has had in a long time. And as a coach, you have to be proud of that fact and know that you're doing something right. But at the same time, you can't let your guys get comfortable with that. So as far as their defensive performances, like on that side of the ball, they've been locked into every little detail. They've been locked into every assignment, and it's a testament to coaching that those kids are buying in like that and are staying as focused as they are, even in the midst of one of the better seasons that they've ever been a part of. So their defense has been playing lights out. Their defense has been on fire the last few weeks, and they're going to need that defense to slow down that 3-headed monster over at McDowell, because between running back, quarterback, and receiver, they've got 3 studs over there that each one of those guys have the ability to make game-changing plays. So every assignment has to be completed. You have to be dialed in on every play call. You can't have any busts. You can't give up any explosive plays because stuff like that against McDowell will kill you. The defense comes and shows up and plays assignment sound football. Like I said, like I'm expecting this to be a very close football game, just like the last one was.
Now, for McDowell, when we flip the script, I think something that has to be noted is when these two teams played back in September, it was Paul Johnson, the starting quarterback. It's going to be Kwani Darnell next week when Erie takes the field against McDowell. I think the problem for the Royals in that game back in September. They allowed the 3 second quarter rushing touchdowns to Stephon Porter. When I look at the Trojans tonight, I don't think I'm as concerned as maybe I was a week ago when they lost to Steubenville, or even at the beginning of the season when they lost those back-to-back games to Walsh Jesuit and they lost to Menor. I think tonight, the one thing that this solidifies for McDowell's offense is they're fine. They're going to be just okay. They are rolling, and they know that at this point, if you're the Trojans, the offense is going to be able to move the ball down the field, which I think when you look at that side of the ball, it's strength versus strength, right? Can McDowell's offense move the ball with consistency against Erie's stout defense? That's the matchup for me. The one thing I am a little concerned about for the Trojans is their defense, specifically up front. I mean, again, I understand they're playing Ohio powerhouses and New York powerhouses tonight in St. Francis, but I would be a little wary if I'm the Trojans that maybe the defense has to shore up a little bit. But I don't think even in a loss tonight, I'm worried about McDowell, and I don't think this is one of those games where, I have major concerns coming out. Your thoughts, Jonathan, on McDowell?
Give me 1 second. I'm trying to pull up team defensive stats for McDowell because I'm looking through their schedule, and they have given up a decent sum of points this season. Like, they're not playing.
I think you have to factor in the schedule, though, right?
Yeah, for sure. They're not playing, especially the beginning of the season and the start of the season. They're not playing scrubs. Yeah. In fact, they're playing the opposite of scrubs. They're playing top 10 teams in Ohio and top ranked teams in the state of New York. So you definitely have to factor that in, that they're not just playing a bunch of nobodies. They're playing some really good football teams. But at the same time, giving up points on defense is kind of a mindset. Like, it's one of those things. You can never get comfortable giving up large sums of points. Obviously, it's football. Things are going to happen. Teams are going to score, and new plays are going to get made on both sides of the ball, and that's just the nature of the game. But as a defense, you go into every game wanting to pitch a shutout. That should be your mindset. You go into every game wanting to do everything in your power to not let the other team score a single point. And to this point in the season, McDowell hasn't had any crazy defensive performances, in my opinion. If you just look at scores alone, they haven't had any crazy defensive performances where they just completely choked out a team, with the exception of Cathedral Prep, but even Prep wound up putting up points late. They have to come ready to play, because I know Erie's getting off that bus expecting to win that football game, which is a difference in mentality than it has been in previous years, from what I understand. Erie's getting off this bus as a confident football team that's walking in there thinking they can win this football game. That is a completely different monster of a team to face than what you're used to facing as a team that is downtrodden and kind of just ready for the season to wrap up. These guys think they can win this football game, and they're going to come out and they're going to throw everything they have at you to win this football game. So you got to be locked in defensively if you're McDowell, because you cannot give up 30-plus points to Erie and expect to win this game.
Yeah, I agree, and it's very interesting. You look at McDowell's schedule, the lowest combined total of points between two teams in a McDowell game this season was McDowell-Erie. In fact, it was the only time in their schedule where both teams were in the 20s. That, again, to Jonathan's point, the defense has not necessarily been the key ingredient to success, although I do think you have to factor in the teams they played and the Ohio gauntlet of powerhouses that they have faced. I will say, to your point, Jonathan, I think momentum is such a big thing, and for Erie having won 4 of their last 5 games, it's going to be a big component. The one thing that I would be concerned about as we continue to talk about this game, and I know we mentioned it a lot last night, and if you have a thought on the McDowell-Erie 6A championship game, let us know. I think the first few drives of this game is going to be so important, because my concern that could happen for Erie, and I thought about this last night when we went home from the podcast, I almost worry to an extent that this Royal team is going to be so hyped and so overzealous to play this game that they're bound to make a big mistake early on. And what I think we saw in the first matchup between Erie and McDowell is that if you're the Royals, you cannot fall behind by multiple scores. As good as the defense has been, as dominant as the offense has performed in the last 5 weeks, you cannot afford, against an Aaron Slocum coach team, which is disciplined and is capable of running the table with guys, you can't go down multiple scores. So I think if you're Erie, maybe more of a conservative game plan early in the contest would be good. If you can get to halftime within a score, even if you're down 7, 8, whatever it may be, I think it falls into your hands, because then you can try to open things up in the second half. And I also think special teams plays a big part as well. We know Erie's capability to be able to rattle off touchdowns. And I mean, how many times have we seen Giovanni Crosby just take kicks seemingly from the middle of nowhere in for scores? So they're bound to make a good special teams play as well. So I think if I'm Erie, I'm going to play a little conservative early in the game. And if I'm McDowell, I would just try to punch these guys in the mouth as quickly as you can, because I think if you're the Trojans, you have to know going up 2 scores early pretty much puts the game, at least in my estimation, out of reach.
It's going to be interesting what the mindset is coaching-wise for Andre Henderson. It's like, do you try to preach to your guys, oh, this is just another game, like some coaches will do, and try to downplay the magnitude of a game? Or do you lean into it? You know, do you let them know, like, yo, this is a big game for us. This is a chance for us to do something we haven't done ever, maybe? Fact check me if I'm wrong. I haven't been here for that long. But this is a chance for us to do something that is relatively unheard of around here. Embrace the moment, embrace how big of a game it is, and come out and play like it's a big game. Come out with your hair on fire. It's 2 differing strategies. A lot of coaches don't like to put that type of pressure on their players because they don't know if they can handle it. Like, to your point, they don't want them to press too much and make a big mistake early that sends them down a rabbit hole, basically, and puts them behind the 8 ball. There are some coaches that lean into it and put that pressure on their guys' shoulders because they think that pressure will make them rise to the occasion. It's going to be interesting to see which approach they take, and I think you'll be able to see it in the first few drives, play calling wise. Do they take shots early? Do they open the game with an onside kick or something crazy like that? Are they running trick plays or on special teams? Like, are they taking shots? Are they going for the gusto early, or are they kind of just getting a feel for the game, trying to settle into a rhythm, hand the ball off, quick pass? Like, are they playing that conservative style that you think might benefit them early on? It's going to be interesting to see. There's 2 ways to play it. One has really big risk, one really big reward. You know, if you go for it early, you could go up a score or 2 on McDowell early and stun them a little bit out the gates. But you also have that potential to make a really crucial mistake that puts you behind the 8 ball. So it's going to be interesting to see which way they attack this game, especially out of the gates.
Yeah, we can't wait for this game coming up. I imagine it's going to be next Friday night. We don't know the specific date or location. I know it was at Edinburgh University last year. I think that's a fair location to put it again this year. But we'll see. And we're going to talk more about it in next week's podcast. It's going to be an exciting time. McDowell, Erie in the 6A championship, man, it's going to be a ton of fun. Jonathan and I will try to be there. I know Jonathan will. We'll see what my assignment is. But we'll see exactly how that game happens. But again, McDowell falls. Erie wins in week number 10 to end their season. And speaking of ending the season, one of the teams that we thought was a bit of a surprise for dropping out. Now, keep in mind they are missing their standout running back and a couple of other weapons as Harbor Creek. But what a performance from the Huskies tonight, taking home the Battle of the Bridge trophy. Let's show you how it was done. There's this trophy, by the way. Look how gorgeous. It's like the BCS National Championship trophy they stole from the College Football Committee. But nonetheless,
that look like that. Oh my gosh.
Yeah, let me go back one more time. I mean, like, that
hey,
thing
is a trophy. I'm not gonna lie to you. For a rivalry game. That's a trophy worth playing for.
I just figured that they would name the bridge in favor of whatever team ended up winning the game. Nonetheless, Harbor Creek started out fast, and I'll tell you what, this guy Cam Herman, he could be as a dark horse running guy in the running for a dark horse D10 Player of the Year. I know that we picked our guys last night. But he's done everything for Harbor Creek this year. Gets the pick on the first drive, runs it in from 11 yards to make it 7-0, and then Harbor Creek just started rolling. They got Toby Vahey involved. He punches this one in from 3 yards. It was just an avalanche of Harbor Creek tonight. That was 14-0 at this point. Then take a look at the passing game. Heath Betza, who has been a stalwart quarterback for Harbor Creek this season, dumps it off. Herman, and watch him go, Jonathan. This guy's an athlete if I've ever seen one.
Yeah, his right stick.
Jonathan doesn't even have words.
His right stick is on right now. I'm sorry, I was stunned. I saw a little back juke just now and right stick down action. He's been playing his college football 25 because he was in his bag.
No need for sprinting on that touchdown. Herman is second of the game. Ethan McAdoo finding pay dirt from 3 yards. It was 28-0 at that point. Then look at this time. That's DeHayden Deluski, who is so open, he probably could have crossed the bridge and scored. Harbor Creek wins 56-14. They get the Battle of the Bridge trophy. Big congrats to Harbor Creek, and a great rivalry out there, by the way. We talk so much about rivalries. Fairview, Girard, such a big one. GM, Fort LaBeouf. We know Prep McDowell every single year. But it's the first time since 2019 that the Battle of the Bridge has been played. Harbor Creek now with their 4th straight win against Iroquois in that series. And I want to talk a little bit about the Huskies, Jonathan, because we were a little surprised at Harbor Creek and Grove City specifically dropping out of 3A when the opt-outs were announced earlier this week. And I think to an extent, I guess I understand if you're the Huskies and John Anger, maybe you don't want to get more hurt. Maybe you want to get those guys ready for basketball season. I know Ryan Smock's gearing up in the gym to get the Huskies ready for their boys' basketball season. But you look at the way that they played tonight. And if I were a coach, and I'm not, but if I were a coach, I'd look at the way my team played tonight and the way they dominated and how they played well in every single facet of the game. And what I would tell myself is this: I don't think we're going to go out and we beat Sharon or Hickory, but man, it'd be so nice to watch these guys get one more crack in the playoffs.
Yeah, for me, there's two sides to the coin. The competitor in me is like, spot the ball, let's line up and play the game, and let the chips fall where they may. Whatever happens, happens. If we get smacked, we get smacked. But we have an opportunity, especially as seniors on that football team, we have an opportunity to do something really special. The other side of that coin for me, like the sentimental side, is if you're going to go out, how would you rather go out, I guess, is losing a first-round matchup to Sharon or Hickory, or finishing your season with a rivalry game blowout. You finish with getting rewarded a trophy, and you just go out on a high. It's two sides of it. I understand the decision. I'm not going to 100% say that I agree with the decision, but I definitely understand the decision to go ahead and drop out, especially when you've been battling injuries and you're really worried about safety of the kids and of your team, and you don't want to risk getting any guys hurt for a game that you're not very close to being favored in. The competitor in me just wants to play, though, because for some of those guys, it's going to be the last opportunity to suit up. You like going out with a win, though. If the decision's been made at this point, we're talking heads. We're just going to talk about it. But what they're doing is what they're doing. So it's like, if that's your situation, you like the fact that you went out the way that you did tonight.
I'll tell you what, we talk a lot about successful teams, and I think justifiably we talk about teams that aren't Harbor Creek because their record's better or they have a head-to-head win against Harbor Creek. But I think if we're talking about teams that you look and you put them in a category of they are right there, right? They are right at the pinnacle of getting over the hump. I think Harbor Creek has to be the first team that you consider. 5-5 to end the year doesn't look all that great until you realize that they have multiple one-possession losses to Mercyhurst Prep, a team that's going to be probably the 2 seed in 2A. They were in that game until the bitter end. Fort LaBeouf, they had the ball down by 4 with a chance to win the game. If one or both of those games go your way, you're 6-4 and you're 7-3. And then you look at the Fairview game earlier in the season, a Fairview team that you were up 14-0 on going into the second half and just happened to play your worst half of football of the season at the wrong time. This Harbor Creek team, and I don't mince words when I say this, could relatively have an argument that if they play, let's say, 2 or 3 better quarters, they're 8-2. And they're 8-2 with a first-year head coach in John Angerer and an offense that is predominantly run. They don't throw the ball very effectively, although they had a couple of nice passes tonight. If John Angerer can come back next season, he's gonna have a different quarterback. He's going to have a couple of different weapons that he's going to have to try to ingratiate into his system. But Harbor Creek's right there. And I really, truly believe that next season, if you're looking at teams that are close to the tipping point, if you will, you have to watch out for Harbor Creek next season, because I think this 5-5 is a little bit under of what I think this team was this season, because they easily could have been 7-3 or 8-2.
Yeah, no, that 5-5 record is very misleading. And if you watched any of the games or you followed any of the games closely, you understand that teams didn't want to play Harbor Creek this year. Like, they got out of games alive against Harbor Creek this year, but Harbor Creek was not one of those teams that you put on the schedule, or you saw them on the schedule and was like, okay, we got an easy one this week. You had the game plan for Harbor Creek. You had to show up and play against Harbor Creek, and Harbor Creek took you down to the wire in a lot of games that they lost. So, like you said, like they've been right there all season, and they weren't able to get over that hump as far as beating a Fort LaBeouf or as far as beating a Fairview, but they've been competitive all season. So kudos to them. Like, you love the way that they played this season, and like you said, if you're John Anger, that has to be a positive that you take into the offseason and something that you kind of preach to your guys throughout off-season workouts, winter conditioning, spring football. Listen, guys, we were 5-5 last year, but we legitimately could have had an argument for 7-3, 8-2. What is it going to take to get to 7-3, 8-2 instead of being 5-5? What is it going to take to finish some of those games that we were competitive in? So for me, it's going to be a positive thing that he can take into the offseason and kind of preach to his guys and kind of dangle over their heads of like, yeah, we were okay last year, but look how good we could have been.
By the way, Heath Bet said we're going to be saying his name a lot more in the spring. He's a standout baseball pitcher for Harbor Creek, and just a multi-sport athlete that is such an important part of this Husky team. Again, big shout out to Harbor Creek in their win tonight. I would have loved to have seen them in a playoff game. I know they probably would not have beaten Hickory or Sharon, but I just think there are so many guys on this team that deserved an opportunity to potentially go in the postseason. But I say this, and I digress by saying I'm not the coach. I'm not the one that's making that decision. And I understand if there are injuries at play or there are just decisions that are external that we don't know about, you make the decision to drop out. Nonetheless, John Angerer's team, a great way to end the year, in a year that ended 5-5 and could have easily have been 7-3 and potentially 8-2, and then we'd be talking a whole different tune going into the postseason. How about the Conneaut Eagles, by the way? We don't have highlights directly from this game, but 35-0, Conneaut shuts out Girard, and I think we probably end here, Jonathan, with this, because we, of course, talked about last night and had the argument, and did so for probably 20 minutes on our pod, about should District 10 take 6 teams or should they take 7? I would make an argument tonight. And again, I full well understand that I am not part of the committee. The committee's probably not going to listen to me, although they should listen to us because our insight is, I think, halfway decent. I don't see why you wouldn't take Conneaut just to give them an opportunity. They end the year 5-5. They come off 2 blowout wins. And, oh, by the way, I know we've talked about our District 10 players of the year and the guys that have floated under the radar. You want to talk somebody who's under the radar this season? Joe Fugali from Conneaut has gone over 2,000 all-purpose yards for the Eagles this season. He just went for 404 yards and 4 touchdowns on the ground for the Eagles tonight. He has had nearly 750 yards, I believe it is, in the last 2 games. And Josh Blood's team, I'll tell you what, and I know he's probably watching this now because he's been texting me back and forth, and I'm not saying this because I think Josh is a good guy, which he is. Josh is a great guy. I'm saying this because we've seen the results in the last 2 games. You got to give this Conneaut team a shot, man. I mean, they have been, and I say this with all due respect, they have been the dormant of District 10 football the last couple of years, and to see the ascension that they've been able to make this season at 5-5, I just think it's not going to hurt you. It's not going to hurt Hickory to have another game. If they're the better team, they should win. But I think Conneaut deserves a chance to get in as that 7th seed, and I think D10 should take 7 teams. And that's just my theory on it.
Yeah, Paul kind of had me a little bit on board last night with the argument of if you're the D10 committee, you probably want everything to be even between Sharon and Hickory, and just kind of going ahead and line it up for those 2 to meet in the championship. Play the same number of games. Don't give anybody an extra game to potentially get somebody hurt. And then Conneaut goes out and beats Girard the way that they did and has a running back with nearly 2,000 yards on the ground and one of the best running backs in the entire district at this point, is if you're going strictly off of yards per game and total yards. You got to put them in. If you're the D10 committee, you have to put them in and just give them a shot and give them a puncher's chance to go in there and potentially knock off one of the perennial powers. Put that running game to the test. Give one of the best running backs in the district an opportunity to play in the playoffs, and at the very least, you get to see him break for 1 or 2 ridiculous touchdowns and put up a decent performance in a loss at the very least. But I was almost on board with it last night of just take 6 teams and get both of them, put Conneaut in and let them play for it at this point, especially off of their last 2 games. They've been playing good football their last 2 games. They've seemed to have hit some sort of stride. Let them try to take that momentum into round 1 and see what they can do.
Look, I think this does 2 things. I think putting them in does 2 things. 3 things, actually. First and foremost, if you're District 10, another playoff game that fans can come out and support District 10 and pay money to watch football. And I think that's a good thing financially, but I think that's the least of the reasons that you put them in. I think the first of the reasons that you put them in is because this will set a precedent. And I think this is not going to be the only example that has to happen down the road, but one of many examples. That if you are a team that traditionally struggles to make it in the postseason, if you are able to have a bounce back season, you will get consideration. And I think, and let me just say this about the committee, because again, I don't know what the committee was thinking before the opt-outs of Harbor Creek and Grove City. I don't know if there was if Conneaut was going to be part of the field before then. But if there was any consideration of putting Conneaut in the 18 field, why would you disclude them to make it an even number? You have to give a team a bye no matter what. I think in my argument last night, for those who didn't watch last night, my argument for putting Conneaut in, if you're talking Sharon Hickory, was Sharon won the head-to-head. Mm-hmm. So, and again, Hickory should be the better team. They should win the game. But I think at the end of the day, like you have to be able to give some sort of an advantage, if you will, to the Sharon squad and give them a bye for being able to come away with that win over Hickory. I also think, too, what this does when it comes to District 10 and when it comes to football is it creates a bit of a parity situation where you can say, hey, the eye test matters in a few ways. And I think again, when you look at the way the last 2 weeks that Conneaut has played, you add that to the start of their schedule and when they started the year 2-0. I understand that they may not have any extremely quality wins on their schedule, but you have to play who's on their schedule. Close loss to Northwestern. They probably should have beat Slippery Rock. They lost at the very last second. I just feel like there's nothing that can hurt you to putting Conneaut in. And again, and I just say this too, I don't know if this is how Hickory would feel. I'm not going to put words in their mouth. I'm just giving my opinion and my analysis. I would think Hickory would want to have the opportunity to play a football game so they can, in theory, get fresh for the semifinals. And I say this over and over. The last thing you want, and you can back me up on this, Jonathan, you're a former player, unless your team is injured to Kalamazoo and back, the last thing you want is to have to wait 2 weeks to play a football game, especially knowing if you're Hickory, you're going to have to go against a Corey team that is hot at 8-2, and then probably Sharon if you win that game. That's just my 2 cents.
Yeah, no, two weeks or more off of football to come back and play a meaningful game is killer. And as a player, I've experienced it. My freshman year of high school, we were going to play for a state championship, and a random investigation later, we had a week delay in our state championship football game. We're gearing up to get ready to take the trip and go play and maybe stay overnight in a hotel. Wait a minute, we're not playing this weekend. Now you got to now you got to practice for an extra week of football. Now you got guys getting antsy. Now you got guys that are annoyed because why are we practicing this whole time? We're not playing. And it's like a whole thing when you have to show up and practice Monday through Thursday. And if you've got a crazy coach out there who likes to see you a lot, you get a walkthrough in on Friday as well. It's a whole different thing when you're doing that and you don't play for 2 weeks. It's different mentally on your players. And it's a lot to put on high school kids to maintain that focus for one game for a 2 week period. So if you're Hickory, I would welcome a tune-up game, honestly. Obviously, you go out there and you try not to get guys hurt, and you go and you try to win the game early, put the game out of reach early, and sit as many guys as you can. But if I'm them, I would welcome playing a first round opponent, playing a tune-up game, so that way you're not coming into that matchup with Corey cold.
And look, we'll see. The District 10 committee will likely release the football playoff brackets this weekend. Traditionally, it's on a Sunday. We'll see if it's in the morning or the afternoon. But we will know this weekend what the playoff brackets look like. One thing we will know, Sharon's going to get a bye in 3A. Unless the committee decides to take 8 teams and they put Slippery Rock in there, which is also, I guess you could say, considerable. Although the Rockets end the season at 3-7, so again, I guess that there's that possibility as well. But again, in all likelihood, it's going to be 6 or 7 teams. And if you take 8, certainly Conneaut's going to make it in. All right, Jonathan Williams, let's go ahead and close with our performers of the night. You can give me a team or you can give me a player that you thought was your biggest performer of the evening and helping their team to a victory. I'll let you start things off.
I'm going to go Erie, the entire football team, Erie High. Dominating win tonight and a really good momentum win for going into your D10 championship matchup. It makes for a compelling matchup and a very interesting game that I think is going to come down to the wire. I don't think it's going to be more than a one-possession game. I think this is going to be a really exciting football game, and this win kind of sets the stage really well for that. So I'll go with Erie.
And I'll go Joe Fugali from Conneaut, as we just mentioned, 24 carries, 404 yards, and 4 touchdowns. By the way, quarterback Ben Easler went over 1,000 yards for the season in the passing department as a quarterback. So congrats to him where that is concerned. Over 2,000 all-purpose yards for Joe in the win tonight for the season for him. And Josh Blood's team's got a really compelling argument to make to say, hey, D10, put us in the playoffs. There's no reason really that you shouldn't with Conneaut sitting at 5-5. All right, great show as always tonight. We have done 2+ hours of podcast content in the last 2 nights, but that's because we love you guys and we really appreciate you all being with us throughout this fall sports season. Of course, we're not going anywhere. We've got much more content coming up next week. Our next live show is Monday, 9 a.m. TalkErie.com, YouTube, X, Facebook, Twitch. Make sure, though, to stay tuned. There is a chance that we may be doing an instant reaction to the District 10 football playoff bracket release. We'll let you know if there's anything on that. We'll at least give you somewhat of an update and our thoughts to the immediate aftermath of those brackets that will be released on Sunday. So it might be a good breakup for all you Browns fans out there who are watching your team on Sunday. But I got your back. Don't worry. I was the one who picked Cleveland yesterday. So maybe a good reprieve for you in the middle of things, Jonathan. But a great weekend ahead, man. Gannonboro tomorrow. Am I going to see you there?
Oh, yeah. You'll see me for sure.
All right. If you want to come up to the broadcast booth, feel free. I tend to get lonely up there sometimes. And I must be the bad luck charm. I've called 4 Gannon games this year. They've lost them all. So I guess that's not necessarily a good omen for Gannon fans, but should be a fun one tomorrow. 12 o'clock at Sox Harrison Stadium in what is the only now local rivalry in the PSAC that is still played. All right. We'll see you all on Monday, maybe on Sunday as well. Stay tuned for that. Until then, make sure to like, subscribe, follow us on YouTube, on Twitch, on X, and on Facebook. We are the Gem City Sports Podcast Network. This has been Week 10, and the next time we talk high school football, it's going to be playoff time, everybody. Stay tuned. We'll see you next week.